What's up, and welcome back to Red Letter Disciple. Today, we're kicking off Season 7. And the mission of this podcast has always been and will always be to challenge all people to be greater followers of Jesus, greater disciples of Jesus. And we believe that when you step into the calling to be the great disciple God has called you to be, the world's going to change. So thanks for being back with us today. We got a great guest today. First, we're going to be joined, of course, by my co-host, Chris Johnson, pastor, friend of mine from Resurrection Church in Sanford, Florida. Today, we're bringing on Dr. Alvin Sanders to the podcast. We're really excited about Alvin. He leads an amazing organization called World Impact that's just done a lot of research with Barna on urban ministry. And so today, we're going to talk about, with Alvin, a return to old school evangelism, just meeting people in community and knocking on doors. Can that still work today? We're going to talk about the top 2 things the urban population is looking for from the church. And I'll be real with you, one of them really did surprise me. And what section of scripture Alvin reads every week that truly describes the life of a disciple. It's going to be great. We thank our partner today for our conversation, Red Letter Living. We create resources that help people become greater followers of Jesus. This podcast is one of them. Our 40-day challenges are another. And so listen up here. We are coming up on the fall of 2024. And I am positive that it's going to be one of the most politically divisive times that perhaps our nation has ever experienced. And you might say, Zach, quit being so negative. Fine. I'm positive it's going to be one of the most divisive times in our nation. So what's one of the very best things church leaders can do? Here it is. Focus on the words of Jesus. When culture divides, Jesus unites. And that's what our 40-day challenges do. They bring focus to what matters. And we would love to partner with your church and have a 40-day experience that's fully ready to go. We have 4 40-day challenges ready to go, including our best-selling inaugural book, Red Letter Challenge. Almost 200,000 copies sold now. But these challenges, they're going to change your church forever as your people become more like Jesus. Our 40-day challenges include kids' books. They include regular books. They include sermon series. They include a small group video and guide, weekly kids' curriculum, graphics package, and more. And I think most importantly, they come along with over 1,000 testimonies, well over 1,000 testimonies of this working in church. So, hey, this fall may be the most strategic time in our nation's history to get a challenge going and focus on the words of Jesus. So here's your next step. Get your custom quote. Figure out what it would look like to get Red Letter Challenge or one of our other 40-day challenges in your church. You can go to redletterchallenge.com/quote. Again, that's redletterchallenge.com/quote, and we will send you back an instant custom quote for you. So, hey, listeners, we're so excited about Season 7. If you haven't already, will you subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening or watching? Would you rate, review, and follow? And we're going to have a great season. So thank you for being with us. Season 7, here we go. Let's go with Alvin Sanders. Let's do this. Welcome back to the Red Letter Disciple. We got a great episode today. We're bringing on to the show Dr. Alvin Sanders.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation.
We don't usually have people of that high of education on the podcast.
He's leveling up this season.
Really starting off with a bang here.
But Alvin is a churchman at heart. He's been a church planter. He's been a pastor. He's been a denominational leader for the Evangelical Free Church of America. In 2015, he moved to World Impact, a great organization, and now serves as CEO of World Impact as well as president. He's also an author too. He wears a lot of hats.
Man.
They just did some incredible research World Impact did with Barna. So we're going to dive into that and really have a great conversation around urban ministry. And so Dr. Alvin Sanders, welcome to the Red Letter Disciple. We are pumped to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
Good
yeah,
to see
man.
you.
I've got a question that I just learned about. I've never met a guy, so I've got to ask you how in the world this happened. Y'all know if you listen, I'm a huge Cleveland sports fan, all tried and true. You talk about the Guardians, the Cavaliers, the Browns, especially the Browns. So
just a bunch of misery.
Yeah,
right
it's horribly sad, really
Complete
unfortunate
misery,
thing that my father passed down to me. But
I want you to be sad.
I don't know that I've ever met Dr. Alvin Sanders. You said prior to this that you are a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, which is like warms my heart. And then right after that, you said you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, which just
That
makes us
that-
enemies.
That makes no sense.
And so rectify this so that we can actually have a good conversation in around urban ministry. But how does that happen?
Good question.
Well, if you pull out your map and look at Columbus, Ohio, which I'm a Columbus kid,
okay,
we'll see that Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Cincinnati, the old AFC Central, now the AFC North, right? Columbus is divided territory. So you're going to see Steelers jerseys, you're going to see Browns jerseys, you're going to see Bengals jerseys. So I went with the Steelers because I don't like misery. Because my dad is a huge Browns fan. So I know about all that misery.
Father.
Yeah. So wait a second. You probably grew up in the time where I'm just guessing here, that the Pittsburgh was on a roll. Like
absolutely.
Harry Bradshaw, like all those guys.
Bradshaw, Swan, Stallworth, Lambert, Green.
Right. Yeah. So I grew up in Iowa, and there's no pro football team anywhere around. So I'm like, I'm going to watch the Dallas Cowboys. They're really doing good.
Go. Yeah.
Yeah. And
wow.
My whole family was Chiefs fans. I'm like, why am I going to be a Chiefs fan?
It'd be nice, like you two, to just be able to choose a team that does really well.
It's so fun. It's so much more fun, isn't it?
40 years ago, but whatever. Can we at least agree in football before we move on to the good part of the show that we both hate the Ravens from Baltimore?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Ratbirds must die.
Yeah. Come on, down with the Ravens. All right, that's good. All right, man. So tell me, you told us you're from Columbus. Let me hear more of your story and how you ended up getting to this awesome organization called World Impact.
Yeah. So basically, I grew up a military brat. My father was 30 years in the Air Force. Born in Maine, spent time in Japan. In fact, I've been told that I used to be able to speak fluent Japanese, which unfortunately all of it is gone. Then he ended up retiring in Columbus, and I grew up a church kid, your typical African-American Baptist church. And I have no crazy come to Jesus story. I always believe in Jesus. There was never a time in my entire life where I did not believe in Jesus. So, my ministry origin story, because like if you're a Marvel fan, every superhero has an origin story, but I'm not a superhero, but I have a ministry origin story. Is although I didn't graduate from there, I started off my college career at Bowling Green State University, which is near Toledo. And while there was a friend by the name of Brian Rome, who unfortunately has passed away, that he did not like how the campus crusades and the intervarsities of the world were approaching ministry on campus, because he felt like, frankly, that they weren't reaching the African American students. So he said, me and you are going to reach this campus. And, when you're 19, 20, you're crazy like that, you think you could do it. So we proceeded to do something that I would not recommend, which we practiced racist evangelism.
Whoa, wow.
So this is how racist evangelism went. When we saw another student or knocked on a dorm door and they were white, we just passed them on by. But if we saw an African-American student, we tried to evangelize them. Again, this is not recommended. This is not biblical.
Time out. So you knock on a door.
That's right.
And let's say Zach opens. What are you saying? What are you doing?
Hey, Zach, how you doing? Sorry, wrong door.
Oh. All right, man. Have a good one.
That's right.
But, come on, Alvin. I'm a soul. I need Jesus.
Hey, I realize that now. But back then, it was like, yo, we got to reach the brothers on campus. So,
can you imagine? That would be a great name for a book.
Racist evangelism.
Yeah. And you didn't do anything in your college years that you look back on and regret, right?
No, never.
That's kind of a rare thing, Alvin.
Yeah. So we end up with this Bible study. We've got 30, 40 students showing up every week.
Cool.
This Bible study. And eventually that Bible study, we started renting out a church space on campus called Prout Chapel. And we began having services on Sunday. And it was through that experience that I found my call that I want to be a pastor. Well, the beginning, I would say it's the beginning of that call of saying, you know what, I think I want to be a pastor, and that's what I want to do with my life. I actually ended up meeting my wife of 30 years now, Alvin Sanders. So
yeah,
met her through that. But that's the sort of the church part of the story. But the real origin part of the story, in terms of getting a heart to want to minister in communities experiencing poverty, although we weren't part of this this campus ministry, Campus Crusade for Christ had this gathering called Impact 1991, where they gathered a bunch of African American students from across the country, and they had this giant conference during the college Christmas break. So there were like 1,000 African American Christian students on fire for Christ. I'd never seen anything like that before. And one of the things we did as part of that conference is we did outreaches in the projects of Atlanta. It was held in Atlanta. And we went to this small urban church. We got these boxes of love, I think they called them, which was food. And we went and visited people who they knew we were coming with the food. We went to this one lady's house. It was two of us. We started talking to her. It was very obvious she was a believer. We said, hey, we'd like to pray for you. What do you want to pray about? And she said, I haven't seen my son in about a year. He's addicted to crack, and I really would like to see him again.
Wow.
So we went in prayer for that. And when we opened our eyes, her son was sitting in the house.
Come on.
Eating out of the box of love. Book of Acts.
Whoa.
We didn't hear him come in. It was the Book of Acts stuff.
Wow.
We literally went to prayer. We opened our eyes, and there he is.
Wow.
And he's sitting and eating out of the food that we brought. So me and the other conference rep, we went back to the church. We obviously testified about what happened. We were excited. We were on cloud nine. And when we got back on the bus, as we were driving out, I saw that same young man on the corner buying crack.
Whoa.
And I literally wanted to stop the bus and run out and tackle him and drag him back to his mother's house.
Yeah.
And that's how God birthed in me a desire to want to build churches in communities experiencing poverty that would help that situation in the long term. So I came back, ended up transferring from Bowling Green State University to Cincinnati Bible College, and the rest is history.
That's amazing, bro. I love that. And I think it's so cool. I think how many times does God use an experience like that you'll remember forever, you're sharing now, to just really solidify what God's doing in your heart already. But then you see that, it's like, yeah, that's the confirmation that I needed. And I love the fact there's so many people, like, God's still real today, and he shows up in those ways. You know, I think sometimes we read through the book of Acts or the Bible, and it's like, why does God do this stuff today? And he does different things. He does new things. It's just sometimes our eyes aren't always.
That's because the book of Acts, Zach, is descriptive and not prescriptive.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it is.
That's really smart. That's one of maybe the smartest things you've ever said on here. I'm kind of taken aback by that.
I know.
That's cool. Cool, man. So you do a lot of urban ministry, and so I'd love, obviously we throw that word urban out a lot. So, like, define what urban is so that we're all kind of on the same page as we enter into, how churches and disciples can enter into urban ministry.
Yeah. So there's two definitions when I talk about urban, because really what we're talking about is what do we mean when we say the word. So if you're talking to a sociologist, urban means three things. It means diversity. Like, when you're in an urban space, there are many different types of people that you're going to run across, whether it's ethnically or sexual orientation, whatever it may be. But it's basically a geographic space filled with people of differences. All right. We're also talking about the amount of people, or density. The fact that in my neighborhood, there's about 100 houses, and people of different stripes. And my little neighborhood is probably bigger than a lot of rural spaces, just my neighborhood, let alone the whole city. So the amount of people that live in close conjunction with one another. And then the third one is distance, meaning how we perceive distance. So, like, World Impact is its headquarters is in Los Angeles, even though I live in Cincinnati. And when you go to Los Angeles and you ask somebody how far it is to get somewhere, they say with traffic, and they give you a number, right? As opposed to if you were somewhere rural, that isn't even what traffic, right? So those three things combined create certain dynamics for how things go. Now, if we're talking about the typical evangelical Christian definition, it's a codified word, which means black and brown and poor. Okay. Doesn't necessarily mean that's true, but your typical evangelical, if you're talking to them and you say urban, that's what they mean. They mean black, brown, poor folk.
Cool. So when you talk about urban, do you tend to, I would say, go to either one of those two camps in your head when you're talking about churches doing urban ministry? Is it more focusing on those three, like the alliteration, right? The diversity, density, distance, or is it more black, brown, and poor, or is it a combination of both of those?
100% depends on the audience.
Cool. Yeah.
And most of the time it ends up being a combination. It ends up being the educative piece for most of my audience, the sociological definition, but then understanding where their worldview is coming from. We also talk about the typical codified Christian thoughts.
That's good. So I'm a big, like, our whole Red Letter brand is always like, if there's a problem or a question in the world, let's look to Jesus to answer, like, how did he do this? And so I'd love to know, like, when it comes to urban ministry, what do you see in the life and ministry of Jesus? Did he deal much with urban ministry? And talk to us about that.
I got this one. Oh, just kidding. I'm kidding.
No. So
come on, man. You got this. Is the flips across the plate right here?
Here's the funny thing that blows people's mind. The New Testament is an actual urban book.
Yeah.
If you read the New Testament, you're talking about urban ministry. If you look at where Jesus spent most of his time, it was in urban spaces.
Uh-huh.
If you look at what the Apostle Paul's strategy was, it was to go into a major urban space because he knew if I reach this city, the gospel is going to trickle to the countryside. So the bigger challenge, and this is what makes people's brains ooze out their heads, is find me context for suburban ministry.
That's right.
Find me context for rural ministry. Because the New Testament, yeah. The New Testament is an urban book. If you pay attention to where they're at and where they're ministering.
Right. You just, like, when he walks in and says, men of Athens, let me tell you about the unknown God.
There you go.
Man, I mean, perfect example. Yes.
Yeah, because what people need to understand is what happens in the urban space is going to affect them one way or another. They could move to the moon. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The urban space is going to affect your world. I mean, for instance, I'm a child of classic old school hip hop, right? Hip hop just turned 50. Okay, whether you like hip hop, hate hip hop, whatever's at the other, it affects everything.
Yeah.
That music genre, which was birthed in a community of poverty of the Bronx in New York City in the mid to late 70s, is the lingua franca of the world. I just saw a video of some kids at a South African graduation playing Drake's Having a Very Bad Summer, Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us.
Yeah.
And rapping to it.
Uh-huh.
South Africa.
Right.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So whether you like it or not, it's at the other, it's going to
affect you.
Things that come out of the urban space are going to affect you. If you want to know what suburban churches will be dealing with 10 years from now, look at what urban churches are dealing with right now.
So, serious question. Are you a Kendrick guy or a Drake guy?
I'm a 80 to 95 guy.
There you go.
So
I have a time warp. I stop about the Fugees.
Right.
Okay. So after that, it's whatever.
What's your jam then? If you're on a desert island, you've got a Walkman. I'm dating myself, and you've got one CD.
That's 80 to 95 though. That's probably the Walkman.
You've got 90, one CD, and you've got a bunch of AA batteries. What's your CD that you're taking with you?
It is Public Enemy's Greatest Hits. That's what it is.
There you go. All right. So if what happens in urban context will be seen, or the effects of it will happen in, let's call it suburban or rural churches, 5-10 years down the road, what do you see right now happening in the urban churches or urban population that those pastors and leaders who are a part of suburban rural churches need to be aware of at least?
Well, you know what? I'm kind of dating myself because with technology and things like that, it might not be 10 years.
Yeah,
to be quite honest with you. But the things that we are all wrestling with right now, gender identity, political divisiveness, dealing with the main thing that World Impact deals with, people experiencing poverty. Those are all suburban things. I was last week, I was in Aurora, Colorado, which is a suburb of Denver.
Yeah.
And it's this beautiful, I'm driving around and it looks like your typical beautiful suburban space. And and I get to the corner and I'm getting ready to turn to go into my hotel. And there's a guy standing on the corner as filthy as can be. And it's very apparent that he's strung out on drugs and he's homeless. The median average price of a home in Aurora, Colorado is over $400K.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw homeless people all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because most of the time you're going to associate homeless. If you're in downtown Denver, you go, oh, okay. But if you're in Aurora, you'll expect to see people walking around, who are homeless and addicted to drugs and whatnot, this, that, the other. In fact, when I was leaving, I'm pretty sure the car next to me was someone who was homeless because it was packed to the gills with stuff, and there was nobody in there. But I'm like, this is a homeless car.
Yeah.
This is somebody who's living in their house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I don't know if but I wonder if, you mentioned gender identity, political divisiveness, poverty, homelessness. I wonder if those struggles are similar percentages, urban versus suburban, rural. If the gap, I suppose, would be getting closer. I bet it would in some of those. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know a whole lot in terms of hard statistics on it, but I do know that urban churches were wrestling with these things a lot soon. There are suburban churches who still don't believe that stuff exists in their community. That's right. What I'll say. They still believe.
Yeah.
And see, and here's the thing here's another thing. I'm sort of getting into the study a little bit early, but here's a big thing that suburban folk have to realize: the credibility and the redefining of the church is not happening in urban spaces. There is not a question of credibility and authenticity in urban spaces that suburban churches are wrestling with right now. And I think it's because urban churches have to be more practically focused upon what's going on around them for their survival. And you can kind of, because of the resources that are available in the suburbs, you can kind of pretend nothing's wrong when you're in the suburbs. Now, there are things wrong, but you can kind of pretend that there isn't anything wrong. And then I think people are starting to sense, well, the younger generation, we want authentic, real faith. We're it was my generation that really they loved the light show, the smoke, the big conferences, this, that, the other. I'm starting to hear more terms like micro church.
Yeah.
And I'm like, micro church, what's that? Oh, small church. Oh, okay. But there's this giant search for authenticity going on in the white evangelical suburban world that the urban church is not experiencing right now. And I think suburban churches, if they're humble enough, if they'll read something like Inside the Urban Church and look for cues from the urban space, it will help them with what they're dealing with right now.
Yeah, because people are actually experiencing those things in their homes and in their neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. It's just that the churches are kind of avoiding, or it's not front and center, perhaps, in some leaders' minds.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings me to a question I have. Zach and I both, I would say, are part of and have been a part of suburban churches.
Mm-hmm.
Our entire career.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So with that being said, we certainly have different kinds of struggles. But my part of my dream is and it's kind of happening. I came from a church that was probably like 90% Caucasian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're probably about 60-70% Caucasian with a good mix.
Wow.
But what can a suburban church do to kind of look outside of their own needs and to come alongside some of these urban churches?
Well, I think this is not true for a lot of suburbs, but for most suburbs, if they said, okay, we really want to reach our community and we're going to go find out who lives in our suburb, they would be shocked.
Right.
To see how many people who are not white who live there. They would also be shocked at the social class to see how many people who in poverty live there.
Yeah.
And if the church has simply said, we really want to minister to our neighborhood, for a majority, again, this is not across the board, but for a majority of them, that will automatically take them on a course of pursuing multi-ethnicity and ministering to folk effectively who live in poverty. So if they just simply said, I want to reach who's here.
So you're saying for a suburban church, just like get out and knock on some doors, maybe. in your own neighborhood. And maybe as a pastor or a lay leader, you'd be surprised at who opens those doors.
We know that the overwhelming majority of church growth is Christian switching churches.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
what happens.
Right.
Okay. So if a church said, you know what, that's fine, we understand that, but we're actually going to try to do evangelism in our neighborhood. We're going to try to declare and demonstrate Christ amongst those who live in our neighborhood. It will automatically take them on a journey of diversity.
That's really cool. You know, it's interesting. I did a sermon a few weeks ago, and I talked about how the greatest detriment to community, I researched this. I can't remember who said it, but was the air conditioner, because before the air conditioner, people like in the South and the Midwest, they'd hang out on their front porch. Neighbors would walk by, and because you didn't want to stay inside your house because it was so stinking hot, right?
Yeah.
And the AC came, and everybody went inside, and they stopped like hanging out with their neighbors. And the number 2 invention was the attached garage, because now you pull your car in the garage, you don't even have to see your neighbors anymore.
That's right.
And the last time, and I'm ashamed of this, but the last time that I actually hung out and like with my neighbors was when we had a hurricane and we all had our chainsaws out and we're cutting up trees in Florida. And I'm like, hey, I'm Chris. And it's like, I'm guilty of it too. You know, I'm guilty of not getting out and seeing. Yeah. So this is a good reminder for pastors and leaders that are listening to this. Like, hey, man, get out, knock on some doors. Our old boss, before he started the church, he knocked on every door in the city. Yeah, and he said, hey, my name's Pastor Paul. I want to meet you. He did that for like a year before he started the church.
Yeah.
Our most effective evangelism program. You should know that when I planted my church a gazillion years ago, when I used to be a planter and pastor in 2000, the number one evangelism program that we had was the simple pastor call, pastor visit. Mm-hmm. Somebody would come visit, or we'd have an outreach program. We had the little 2x4 cards or whatever, and you'd fill it out. And within 48 hours, me and a member of the church would be sitting in their living room.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying we got to go Jehovah's Witness on them. That's what you're saying.
Not quite Jehovah's Witness, but listen, this thing, I mean, you're talking about the hyper individualized part of culture. Mm-hmm. You would be shocked with how many people would say something like, I've never had a pastor come and visit me before.
Yeah.
Wow, this is awesome. They thought it was doing something special, and how lonely people were. Mm-hmm. And then you get to know them, you start talking with them. When I pastored from 2000 to 2007, we used to track religiously like unchurched people who didn't go to church, who didn't start going to church. And we were a small family church. 75% of our folk never went to church before until they start coming to our church.
Yeah.
And I believe it was a simple method of just, I'm going to build relationship with people. I'm going to, I don't know, do what Jesus did, meet people at their place of need, the woman at the well, all this stuff. Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house today. I mean, just the simple.
Wee little man.
I'm going to show you that you're important to me.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and I would meet people at Starbucks. I'd meet people everywhere. And, you know, but they were just so shocked, you know, because we'd have on a card. Now, this is how we differ from the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Would you like me to visit? Okay. So if they checked yes, which I would say 80% of the people did, then within 48 hours, I'm sitting in their living room.
That's pretty cool.
I've taught before, you know, I think the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to church growth is you spend all this time to try to attract new people to come to your church. And then when they fill out some sort of welcome card or connect card and you got questions on there, it's like figuring out that next step of visiting them quick and fast. And in some churches, it can be the pastor, and other churches, it can be shared with staff. But like, that's such a low hanging fruit that a lot of us church leaders miss out on. It's like, why do we work so hard to attract them? And then once we get them here, they actually give us their information. We're just saying, I want you to be in my life.
If they give you your information, and particularly in this day and age, if they give you their cell phone number,
right,
they really want you to contact it. Who doesn't want a free cup of coffee at Starbucks? Hey, I'll meet you at Starbucks, buy you a cup of coffee, sit with you for an hour, get to know you.
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly, most people are going to say, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm not a
with
coffee
that.
guy. I'd get a smoothie there.
There you go.
Those,
If I put my cell phone
Pink
on
drink.
something, if I put my real cell phone on something, I definitely want somebody to contact.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly
cool.
right.
So I learned so far that you're getting rid of your air conditioner at your home and in your church, which is good.
I'm building a huge front porch.
No, I think what every year for the past, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, in some way, shape, or form, we've had some sort of sermon series, like you asked for it. And so some of the stuff you mentioned, again, I think sometimes suburban churches may want to avoid it, but those questions, like 2 of the 3 things you mentioned, are the top questions around gender identity. LGBTQ stuff is definitely, number 1. And then the political divisive stuff is number 2.
I don't see that.
Yeah, right. What I don't hear being asked in the suburban churches, in those offerings where we actually ask them to ask us questions, is anything about serving the poor, helping the poor.
Yep.
That one, for whatever reason, is missing. But I think that's curious. So I want to get to you and the work you do at World Impact and the study in just a moment. But I think I heard you on another podcast. Might have been with our friend Rich Birch. I heard you say that you read a certain section of Scripture every week, and it's the Sermon on the Mount. So tell us, obviously, 90% of our listeners may know what the Sermon on the Mount is, but what is the Sermon on the Mount, and why are you reading that particular Matthew chapters 5 through 7 every week of your life?
And don't you have it down by now?
Well, that's a new spiritual practice I started this year because I was actually shamed by this. I was reading something and they told me that Gandhi read the Sermon on the Mount every day.
Whoa.
Now, to our knowledge, Gandhi's not even Christian.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
if he can do it.
And then because it's like, well, why is he reading it every day? He said, because he said something to the effect, I'm going to paraphrase, the way of Jesus is so powerful. Right. And I'm like, man, okay, so let me, we've all read the Sermon on the Mount, but I said, so let me start focusing on it. And I'm not disciplined enough that I'm going to read it every day. But I said, you know what? Every Sunday morning before I go off to church, this, that, the other, I'm going to read it. And the Sermon on the Mount is the longest. This is, we're big on red letters here,
Come
right?
on, baby.
It's the longest passage of red letters, or the longest recorded history of what Jesus actually said that we have in the entire Bible, right? So I think Jesus, in my opinion, he boilerplates down the Christian faith. Like if you had nothing else to read and you say, what does it mean to be a Christian? It's Matthew 5 through 7. It is the Sermon on the Mount. And if you read it every week, you realize if you're doing Christianity and it's easy, you're doing it wrong.
That'll preach.
It is radical.
Yeah.
If you really try to follow what he's saying, it's radical. And so it's just a reminder to me as to the radicalness of my faith and how I need to be walking with the Lord as best as I possibly can. And it's really increased my spiritual walk and my spiritual journey this year.
That's cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say go even taking it beyond the word Christian to I think if you want 3 chapters of the Bible to describe what a disciple practices. This is the section. I was joking with that, that Jesus, he has the greatest sermon ever preached, and I've got the longest sermon ever preached,
you did.
which, Guinness
56
told me that.
hours. How many hours did you go?
53 hours.
3 hours.
Minutes,
Yeah.
So
Are you serious right there?
Yeah. We're
So he
coming up on a decade ago.
About 10 years ago, he did this big fundraiser to raise money for
recovery home
in Orlando area.
Very nice.
And he went 53 hours, and then a couple months later, some dude from India beat him.
Yeah, I got the certificate.
He's got the certificate. Yeah,
that's okay. That's all right.
He didn't preach a sermon, so I can still say I have I'm the longest winded preacher of all time. But
awesome.
Yeah. And every Sunday he goes just a little bit shorter than that.
Right. We actually have to start on Friday. But anyway, no, that's great, man. I think that's so cool. I would say my love for the Sermon on the Mount really came during my seminary years when I read Dallas Willard's Divine Conspiracy book that really unpacks the Sermon on the Mount more. And it taught me that there is, in my mind, and again, everybody phrases them terminology different. There's a difference between Christians and disciples, and that's the real issue that this podcast tries to get after. Is even in our nation today, we still have 63% that self-identify as Christian. But Barna, who we'll talk, you work with Barna later. They're down to about 20% are actually what they call practicing Christians, what we would maybe say are disciples. So it's like, we've got to get this thing from the head, which a lot of us are still, for whatever reason, saying yes to and ascribing to actually look like what Christ calls us. And I think the Sermon on the Mount does that. So, and you do that at World Impact. So tell me about World Impact and how you guys do ministry, especially with churches, how it can help the church today.
Yeah, as CEO, I told you all my ministry origin story. I see myself as a facilitator of that process of helping people, and this is what World Impact does. We help people declare and demonstrate Christ in communities experiencing poverty. That's what we do. And we do that through teaching and training people on how to do that more effectively, in which we call redemptive poverty work. We have 4 core programs. Our largest program is what's called TUMI, the Urban Ministry Institute. It's our church-based seminary program where we actually bring seminary to people who are ministering in those communities.
Awesome.
It's not an accredited program, but if you do, there's a couple of different curriculums. And if you do the whole entire curriculum, which is like 3-4 years, you can go off and get like entrance into places like Fuller. Fuller, you can graduate from nowhere, but if you have a certificate from us, they'll let you in the Fuller. And so we have agreements like that with several different Christian colleges. The program that has, unfortunately, the biggest potential for growth is our trauma healing training program. We train people who want to do what's called trauma-informed care. Obviously, you see a lot of that everywhere, but you really see that in the urban context. As I pastored in the urban community, 100% of the women who came to our church, who lived in the community, had some sort of traumatic experience they had to overcome. So I wish I had some sort of training to know, okay, if you're a pastor or if you're a congregant, how do you respond to that in a way that'll help them go deeper and seek counseling in which they really need, right? So that's our trauma healing program. We also have our urban church planting training program where we train people. If you really say, I want to start a church in a community experiencing poverty, how do I do that? That's our forte. We're one of the rare organizations that will teach you how to church plant in a community experiencing poverty. And then I'd say the last program we have, which is actually a subset of our church-based seminary, is prison ministry. We actually train prisoners to do ministry behind bars. Like we know in Hutchinson, Kansas, there's a church of 200 prisoners.
Come on.
Ran by prisoners we train behind bars. So instead of, hey, somebody's going to come from the outside in, no, God is at work inside the prisons. And guess what? A lot of those folk are going to get out. And if they get out and they're trained to do ministry, they're going to light the world on fire, which
that's really interesting to me too, because I mean, for the time being, they can't go anywhere. It's like the Apostle Paul being chained to, the guard, and he's like, oh, cool, I get to be chained to this guy for 8 hours. I'll tell him about Jesus, So, and for me, I think prison ministry is one of the toughest things in the entire world to do. That's really cool that you're training people inside that already probably have relationships where it would be so much harder for somebody like us to walk in and get the credibility to be able to do it. I think that's a genius idea.
They have God's calling. Their lives have changed. They're looking for the same training of anybody else. The state of California loves us because we did a study, and folk who go through our programming in prisons in California, there's a 6% recidivism rate, meaning like only 6% of them ever return back to prison.
Wow.
That's
amazing.
Which
we attribute to the work of God, right?
Yeah, that's
amazing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so redemptive, and like the message of grace obviously is for all people, but especially, how much do we resist that grace until we've hit rock bottom? And for many folk that are in prison, that is that moment where that grace just becomes real, and how cool and powerful of a story they have when they get it right. So
94%
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you never got a 94% in seminary your entire life. This
Me?
guy's, and he's hitting
might have
94.
Well, you know, people. Here's what I found out about people in separation of church and state. If they find out you're effective, bring it on. Bring more.
Yeah. Right.
Bring more in.
Right.
And effective for them may not be effective spiritually or biblically. Effective may be you make good citizens or
Right.
help
Exactly right.
and a lot of times it is that
they're
in
not
their world.
they're not coming back to jail.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah, that's cool. So I've heard you before as well. I think you say both churches and Christians, like we need to go beyond charity, like when it comes to engaging the poor or the urban communities. And so how do we do this?
Yeah. So the average person in the pew, if you're talking about, people in poverty and we tell them what we do, like I just told you, they look at us like we got 3 eyes on our forehead because they're like, wait a minute. I thought ministry to people in poverty is I give them food from a food pantry, or I give them a backpack for their kids to go back to school, or really it involves a transaction of materialistic goods.
So true. Yep.
That's what the average person thinks ministering to the poor is. And you know what? That is true. That is right. That is needed. That has to continue to happen. But if you really want to see transformation, if you want to transcend poverty, it has to be a long-term relational effort with the people who are in the community.
Yeah.
That's why the local church is such a powerful instrument in the lives and hearts of those who are experiencing poverty, because the local planted urban church is there in the neighborhood for the long haul. The reality is Jesus said the poor will always be with you. He didn't say that to be what's the word? To sort of say, don't forget about them. I mean, forget about them, I guess I should say. He didn't say that to say, well, since they're always going to be here with us, no big deal. It was actually a reference to Deuteronomy 15. And if you look at Deuteronomy 15, that is a plan for the long-term care of those who are in poverty. So the charge to the church is, how do you provide long-term care? Because the most people are not going to switch poverty classes. We're all good American capitalists, right? So we think what ails you is you got to switch classes. We got to uplift you, and we got to get you out of poverty, and we got to get you into the middle class, which obviously having money in your pocket and not having money in your pocket, which one you want to choose, right? I want money in my pocket, and that's awesome. And we want to see that happen.
I got multiple pockets. I wanted to. Yeah.
But what the church is charged with is long-term care for those who are in poverty. And if it's long-term care, what does that look like? The church that I used to pastor, River of Life Church, my wife, who has a social work and a counseling degree, here's what our food pantry looked like. You came in, you of course could get food, but you know what? You can also go over to what we called a nursing station, and we had an agreement with Xavier University where their nursing students would come and do health checks for them. And if they found anything wrong, they would send them around the corner to the local clinic. We also had a pastor back there, or a spiritually mature congregant that we called a spiritual station. And if you wanted prayer, if you wanted a light Bible study, you can go back there and you can have that. And all that was, you remember back in the day, the whole old term seeker sensitive?
Yeah.
Well, that was our seeker sensitivity. That was the third space, the communal space that you could come in, and we're going to meet you at your point of need. We're going to minister you holistically. And then what happens? Some of those folk trickle into Sunday service. They trickle into the church. In fact, a gentleman just died at River of Life Church. I no longer pastor it, but we still attend there, by the name of Gregory Edwards. And Gregory Edwards was second in charge of the food pantry. He started off as a client. But he found the Lord, got invested in, discipled, became a member of the church, and was second in charge of the food pantry. So it's this long-term, I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to laugh with you. I'm going to cry with you. We do funerals for food pantry clients.
Wow.
Yeah, we do funerals. In fact, I would venture to say that even though a majority of those folk who are in that pantry do not come to our Sunday service. If you ask them what their home church was, they'd say River of Life Church.
That's cool.
24 years later, and as somebody who's no longer pastor there, I planted and pastored church from 2000 to 2007. It's 2024. It's still going there. Still vibrant, still strong. Food pantry still going. I'm not a grandparent yet, but I'm getting a taste of what it means to be a grandparent because I'm so proud of that. I'm like,
That's
man,
cool. Yeah.
It's all grown up now.
Your baby. Yeah. Your baby.
Yeah.
He's about to grow up and have some kiddos, which is cool.
Yeah. So to wrap up, what we mean by going beyond charity is what's your long-term call?
Yeah.
Right. I challenge every Christian. You should be doing 3 things for people who are in poverty: time, talent, treasure. What are you going to give? What organization, whatever, what are you going to give for helping people in poverty, their quality of life gets better? What are you going to give, not only money-wise, but with your time?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an hour in your week to go to a school and tutor a kid? What do you have for an hour a week? Because no one can tell me you don't have an hour. Right. So it says, well, I don't have time. You're going to tell me you don't have an hour?
You just binge watch the whole new season of Cobra Kai. Come on.
Instead of binge watching Cobra Kai, go find somewhere to volunteer. If your church doesn't have it, find somewhere else where you can just give some time.
Yeah.
And use your talent. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my challenge, to go beyond poverty. It's a long-term deal. So commit to it long-term.
So good. And, a lot of what you were talking about sounds super familiar. We had the author of One Helping Hurts, Brian Fickert, on.
Yes, I know him. Good guy.
Great guy. And it really reminds me of those 3 categories in his book, Relief, Rehabilitation, and Development. And
yes,
the normal suburban church, and maybe rural too, I suppose, American Western mindset is a relief mindset. Let me give some dollars. And so of the 3, time, talent, and treasure, we actually more go the treasure route than the other 2. But man, those other 2 are so important. The treasure or the time and the talent, or the relief, the rehabilitation and development. So that's so good, man. Yeah. So you guys just did a study with Barna. So I'd love to hear, you and World Impact doing this study with them. What were some interesting things that you found from that study that really can impact churches and discipleship today?
Well, one of them I already told you, which is that the urban church has incredible credibility that its suburban counterparts don't have. So that credibility needs to be leveraged. And I already talked a little bit about it as well, in terms of the way that one of the ways you can leverage that credibility when I explain the food pantry. But let me ask you all, have you all read the study or anything before I ask this question?
I've just looked at a couple of the key points and heard you talk about it.
Okay. So I don't know then. I'm going to ask my red jacket friend, because I don't know if he's read. What do you think that the number one thing that both the churched and the unchurched urban residents said they wanted from a local church? They agreed on one thing.
Okay. I think the classic answer would be community, but you can get community so many different places now. I'm going to go with that. That's a guess.
And I would guess either relationship or mental health stuff.
Yeah, you all are right there.
Yeah.
Loneliness.
Yeah.
Both the church and the unchurched looked for the church to provide a space to disrupt the loneliness of their lives, which I expected it from the church. I did not expect it from the unchurched. I thought the unchurched would say better housing, justice, all these things that we think of. And that doesn't mean that they aren't important.
Right.
But basically what the unchurched said is, if you want me to engage the church, make your building a communal space, or do something that's community oriented where you can help me belong, because I need a space to belong. Furthermore, they also still look to the church to be their moral compass.
Interesting.
So like
that's the unchurched?
Yes. When a George Floyd happens or something like that, they are looking, the church, unchurched residents are looking for the church to provide what do I do in this situation? That's why, in my opinion, Christian nationalism is the biggest threat to the local church in the United States because they don't want politics and religion. They want to know, what's my moral compass? What do I do here? When things are going bad, when the world's falling apart, they are still looking to the church to give them guidance. That doesn't mean they're going to show up on your Sunday service, but it does mean that is an entrance into their life and you can have influence on them. As a former pastor and as a clergy person, right? They still expect me to act holy.
Yeah.
Because people say, oh, well, you got to be edgy to reach them. It's at the other. You know what edgy is? I've been married to my wife for 30 years. Who can say that? You want to be countercultural? I've never cheated on her.
Yeah.
I got 2 kids with one woman.
Yeah.
How countercultural is that? Right?
Yeah.
We didn't live together before we got married.
What?
Listen.
Come on.
Basic tenets of the Bible.
Yeah. Come on.
Do you know how many people told me, Alvin, I don't believe in Jesus and I'll never believe in Jesus, but I know you do. Like I know I'm a pastor back at Hosek Baptist Church in Columbus, Ohio. He used to say, do you have enough evidence in your life that if you went to court, you can be convicted of being a Christian?
I love that. That's cool.
That's Matthew 5:7 stuff.
Yeah. Who said that? Because I want to say it 3 times that it eventually becomes my own quote.
Pastor, the late great Pastor Percy Carter of Hosek Street Baptist Church in Columbus,
Percy
Ohio.
Carter. Come on, that's good.
March with King, with a colleague of Kings.
Oh, cool. That's amazing.
Yep.
Can you clarify for me, as we're talking about this study and you're talking churched and unchurched, was it specifically a study with urban population or everybody?
Urban population.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify
Urban population, 8 major cities.
Yeah,
8 major cities. I forget how many focus groups, but 2,000 surveys. And we wanted to measure the attitudes of both the church and compare them to the attitudes of the unchurched as well, who lived within urban metropolitan areas.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But remember, what happens in the urban space, there you go, expands out. So I wouldn't be so the suburban pastor can look at this and say, okay, I don't know if this is going to be the trend. I don't know if this is the trend or not in the suburbs, but it's coming my way. So if I structure my outreach programs around community engagement, around creating third spaces, around allowing things that, like one of the largest churches in the country is in Cincinnati called Crossroads Church, right? Yeah. They have this ginormous building in Oakley, portion of Cincinnati. Monday through Friday, it's an open space for anybody to come in and hang out. Free coffee. They got tables around. That's just one of the things that they do. That's simple. We're going to keep our building open 6 days a week.
That's cool.
Or 7 days or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Just something simple like that.
Yeah, to me, the more I'm hearing about it everywhere too. So I agree that it's not just urban, and it's probably already in suburban, and if not, it'll reflect. But that cry against loneliness is such an important thing that and even when we look at those time, treasure, and talent, I think what that's really a cry for is give me your time, right?
Yeah.
That we need time with one another as human beings, and especially if we can get time with one another who look different and are different and get to experience other culture, how much healing and bridging of the gap that would do. It's so good.
I mean, when I was a youth pastor a gazillion years ago in the 90s, in Bible college, a lot of Bible college students had a side gig, right? You were
after your racist evangelism.
That's right. Right.
And right after Public Enemy. Yeah.
There you go. No, Public Enemy was still bumping. But my outreach program was very simple. I went up to the local middle school. I said, hey, I used to play basketball. I have a heart for the kids. I'm a youth pastor. What do you need? And they said, you know what? We don't have any after-school curricular activities. So it'd be awesome if you coach the basketball team. I coached the basketball team. Got to know the parents. At the end of the season, we brought them all into the church and had a banquet for them. Time, talent, treasure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Church sponsored the team, bought the uniforms, all that. 3 years later, when I left, that school had 5 or 6 after-school programs.
Wow.
That's really cool.
It went from 0 to 5, and it was just because I was following Jesus within that community and did something very simple of what that local school needed.
Yeah. Awesome. And so I'm hearing how can we combat loneliness? I'm hearing, which I don't think we hear very often from the media and culture, that we are still providing a necessary moral compass.
Absolutely.
Which is really cool. That's new to me. Again, with everything I'm hearing, I'm not hearing that the culture is looking or needing us for that, and they are. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And is there a third or any other important things for us?
I would say that the community is waiting for the church to take its place at the table.
Mm.
Now, I don't know if that's a subset of your first two, but I would say that's the biggest thing, that they like actually want you there. There's this narrative like, oh, they don't want you there. No, they don't want Christian nationalism there. Yeah. But if a church that's going to engage its community and give time, talent, and treasure to it, they absolutely want you there.
Yeah. Cool. Can I follow up with one more question there? Because I heard you talk about it a couple times. What is it specifically about Christian nationalism that is a threat to our discipleship and especially to our churches today? That from your side, I'd love to hear that.
It cheapens the gospel. Raise your hand if you ever saw Jesus with a "I love Rome" shirt on, or "I love Israel" for that matter.
No, the closest would be just give Caesar what is Caesar's.
Well, listen, look at, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, so whoever should believe in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Right? He's talking to Nicodemus, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. The biggest mistake that the Jewish disciples made was that they thought there was going to be a new Israel ushered in politically by Jesus. And Jesus is like, no, you have to be born again. Mm-hmm. This kingdom is not about this earth. It's from the spiritual world. It's dropping in from a whole nother place. Yeah. There is no political persuasion that can contain the message that I have.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
So people come along and they say, oh, America is the new Israel. No, it's not. Israel's not even the new Israel right now.
Yeah.
Okay? That's why Jesus came.
Yeah.
He came. There's no political ideology that can contain Matthew 5-7.
Yeah, it's good.
And I'm gonna steal this. I stole this from somebody. It's not the donkey, it's not the elephant, it's the Lamb of God. All right.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
So that's what it's about. So if somebody is looking for something to change their life and they come into a perverted political Christian message, it's not going to change your life. It's not going to do what it's going to do, because politics can't change your life.
Yeah.
We all have our political partisanship. Go with where you may, but the reality is we are citizens of the kingdom of God. We have a whole new way that we're supposed to be operating. And if we believe in Jesus, the Bible tells us the Holy Spirit fills our lives and hearts, and we become children of God. And then we go forth and we try to change the world through that. That's why Christian nationalism is so it's like it's fool's gold. It's, hey, I'm hungry. Oh yeah, here's these empty calories. This will help you.
Yeah. That's good. And I think so timely too, which is why I wanted to ask you, we're going to be coming up on, one of the most politically divisive times, certainly in our existence.
So Zach wants to know who you're voting for.
No, but I know that we have listeners on probably on both sides and everywhere in the middle, and probably both sides, the extremes of and it's just a great reminder of citizens of heaven first. And at the end of the day, Jesus is still on its throne, no matter what happens in November. And so I love that. So Alvin, we ask every guest, and I might have heard it earlier, so if you want to go the same direction, just double down on that.
Okay.
And if not, we ask every guest to challenge our listeners that if they could do one thing practically this week to be a greater disciple of Jesus, what would you challenge our listeners to do this week?
Yeah, I've already answered that. Go in your prayer closet, read your scriptures, and dig into them about what does Jesus say about making the lives better of people who live in a community experiencing poverty, and then decide, I'm going to commit some time, I'm going to commit some of my talent, and I'm going to commit some of my treasure to make their lives better.
Love that.
and
All
make
right,
that a lifetime practice.
Come on, let's do that. And so if listeners, you take that challenge on, come on, hashtag Red Letter Disciple, or even email us, hello@redletterchallenge.com. Let us know what that's looking like. We just want to encourage you and be a cheerleader for you as you take on the call of Christ more seriously.
Yeah.
All right, Alvin, if people want to connect with you, where can they find you these days and all the work you're doing?
The easiest, if you want to connect with me personally, the best way is on LinkedIn.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, I'm not an Instagram guy. I think I have an Instagram account. I don't know when the last time I've been on Instagram. If you want to see me in my silliness, you can contact me on Facebook, because I talk about everything on Facebook: sports, music, whatever, this, that, the other. So LinkedIn for the professional stuff, Facebook for the goofy stuff. That's the easiest way to find me. Or you can go on the worldimpact.com, where worldimpact.org, I should say, website, and fill in a document or whatever, just at the other, and say, hey, I heard Red Letter and the podcast, and I want to learn more, or I want to talk to Alvin.
Yeah.
Easiest way to find me.
Awesome, bro. We'll put those links in the show notes as well. All right, we only got one thing left to do here, and that's to hand it over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Zach.
To do what you do.
So Dr. Alvin Sanders, we've learned a lot today about, giving your time, talent, and treasure. We've been educated today, so I appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions for you. Number one, Dr. Sanders, who's your favorite Sanders? Would it be Dion or Barry?
What about Colonel?
Colonel, Barry, Dion. Go ahead.
I would say Barry.
Okay, Barry.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. No relative, though, of course. No.
Not that I know of. Okay. I wish, but not that I know of.
All right. So you are a big The Ohio State University fan. That's what I've heard.
Yes, sir.
And you've liked the Buckeyes for some time.
Yes.
Your entire life?
Entire life.
Okay. Well, I'm a Hawkeye fan, and we got a Nebraska fan here. He's a fake Big Ten guy. But anyway, we're OG Big Ten people. I'm going to test your knowledge of Ohio State football.
To see if he really is, to know if he's a credible guest.
Is he a bandwagon guy, or is he a real fan?
He is with the Steelers, but go ahead.
Oh, hey. All right. I'm going to start off easy. If you don't get this, we're just going to shut the podcast off. I'm sorry, but that's the way we roll. If this was Millionaire, this would be the $1 question. Okay. What is the name of the Ohio State University home stadium? Is it? Go ahead. No, go ahead. You don't need
Ohio Stadium.
Yeah, that is correct. And the nickname, of course, is
the Horseshoe.
That's right.
Stadium? Yeah.
Yep, that's right. And for extra bonus points, do you know when Ohio Stadium hosted its first game? What year?
Gosh,
I know that's tough.
That's a call a friend one.
Yeah.
But I'm going to guess 1920.
I'll give you 20. My goodness. I was going to give you 5 years, 1922. You're on fire. Okay.
All right.
That was good. All right. Oh, this is so easy. Who is the current Ohio State coach?
Ryan Day.
Yes, sir. That's it. Okay. This one's a little bit more challenging. When did Ohio State last win the Rose Bowl? Was it 2020, 2019, 2017, or 2015?
2020. No. Wait a minute. Say that again.
Okay.
Give me those names. Give me those years again.
It's 2020 or 2019.
Okay. 2020 was COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
So wasn't that we beat Utah? So it had to be 2019.
So it was 2019.
Okay.
And they beat Washington 28-23.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. Wait
a minute.
Well,
but you got it. You nailed it.
You got it.
You stopped yourself right.
Yeah,
right
you stopped.
Well, when did we beat Utah?
I don't know. I'm not an Ohio State fan.
I'm challenging this. I'm saying there's a later date where we beat Utah. Because the last time we went, CJ Stroud lit them up.
When was this quiz made? Maybe it was made in 20.
Come on now. I'm saying we beat Utah I'd say we beat Utah last. That's what I'm saying.
Zach is my research expert.
Okay. That's right.
Who is
CJ Stroud looked them up?
Who is Ohio State's career rushing yards leader? Is it Eddie George, Ezekiel Elliott, Archie Griffin, or J.K. Dobbins?
Man, this is a hard one.
Yeah, man.
So I'm going to go with the least expected, J.K. Dobbins.
Okay. It is, in fact, Archie Griffin, who finished his career with 5,588.
I tried to go off the beaten path. That didn't work because I was like, that's too obvious.
All right. How many? I only have two left. How many Ohio State Buckeyes have won the Heisman Trophy? Was it 8, 7, 6, or 4?
Archie Griffin was one of those, right?
Yeah.
He won it twice. Are we counting Archie twice?
Yeah. Oh,
it's a good question.
That is a good question.
We're going to find out after.
I'm going to say 7.
The correct answer is 6. It was Troy Smith, Eddie George, Archie Griffin, Howard Hopalong Cassidy, Nick Janowitz, and Les Horowitz.
Okay, but Archie won it twice.
What? Okay, I'll give it to you. All right.
Your quiz is terrible.
Right.
All right. This is the final question.
Okay.
Which the Ohio State University alumnus, won 4 individual NCAA track titles before his Olympic success? Was it Carl Lewis, Jesse Owens, Ben Johnson, Edwin Moses?
Jesse Owens from Cleveland, Ohio.
It was, in fact, Jesse Owens from Cleveland, Ohio.
There you go. Northeast Ohio.
Come on, Olympics. Let's go.
Oh, yeah. Hey, look at me being, by the time this goes, it'll be over.
But who knows?
All right, you win. You are an official Ohio State fan. And
I've done some deep research since the question was asked.
Yeah.
Never before has this happened on the Red Letter Disciple podcast.
What?
But you, Alvin, broke the quiz. You are correct.
What?
Thank you.
Your quiz is a joke.
What?
Don't mess with me, bro.
I don't know that we can trust Chris. The Ohio State University Buckeyes beat the Utah Utes 48-45 on January 1st, 2022 to win the Rose Bowl.
22.
Thank you very much.
22.
Don't mess with me.
Yeah, you don't mess with
me when it comes to Ohio State,
or
man.
CJ Stroud.
All right.
Man, that
That's
guy's
right.
Well, I sure hope you have a rotten season this year.
And I hope both your football teams do. No. Awesome, Alvin. Hey, man, thanks so much for being a part of the Red Letter Disciple. We're truly blessed to have you on today. And I really hope that listeners, especially pastors and church leaders, take it serious to get involved in the urban community. Let's use our time, talent, treasure, make a difference, and all for the glory of God. So take care, Alvin. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
What a great way to kick off season 7 of the Red Letter Disciple. Alvin Sanders, thank you for joining us and for refocusing ministry leaders and pastors, especially, on the importance to do urban ministry and the fact that they're not only looking for church to be an answer to combat loneliness, but the one that surprised me was even the moral compass. You don't hear that a lot. I'm really glad I got to hear that. I hope you are too. So thank you so much, Alvin. If you want to lock in with Alvin or get to know him a little bit more, you can check out our show notes at redletterpodcast.com. Any of the links that were talked about in the show will be at redletterpodcast.com with the episode with Alvin. Also, remember our sponsor there, Red Letter Living. We're talking about these 40-day challenges and how this might be the perfect time, maybe the most advantageous time to ever focus on the words of Jesus is the political season we're walking into. So go to redletterchallenge.com/quote, and we will give you a custom quote of what it would look like to do a 40-day challenge in your church. And when you do that 40-day challenge, what's going to happen? Your church is going to grow. Your small groups are going to grow. You're going to be unified as you focus on Jesus. And as ministry leaders, we're going to have everything creatively done for you. So you don't have to think of anything creatively from scratch. We've got more than 1,000 stories of God doing this in churches, and we'd love for your church to be one of them. All right, next week, we got an amazing guest coming on to the show, a really great friend of mine. His name is Greg Griffith. I work with Greg at King of Kings. He's the lead pastor. And one of the things Greg Griffith has done is he has become a working genius facilitator or coach. Working Genius, if you haven't done it, you're going to learn more about it next week. But I think it is the assessment that is so important for you who work in ministry or work anywhere to understand like what brings joy and fulfillment in your work and how you can be more productive. So we're going to talk to Greg and we're going to geek out a little bit on the working genius. We're going to even talk about what we think the working geniuses of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are. So maybe we're treading in some weird waters, but I think it's a pretty enlightening conversation. So come on back next week for the Red Letter Disciple. And the way you come on back, you don't miss it, is hitting that subscribe or follow. That way it shows up in your feed. And remember to rate and review if this podcast is meaningful for you. That means the world to us. So we can keep doing stuff like this. God bless you. Have a great week, and we'll see you back for the Red Letter Disciple.